So we're going to first start with a quick introduction of exactly what the New Brunswick Association for Community Living, or who we are. So NBACL is the provincial nonprofit organization that was established in 1957 by a number of locals, including individuals with intellectual disabilities, their family members, friends, neighbors, and professionals who all wanted to strive to improve the quality of life for individuals with a disability. NBACL works to foster inclusive communities where everyone feels they belong, are valued, and can meaningfully participate in all aspects of community life. We have programs that support all ages and stages of life. I'd like to take a second to introduce myself. I am the Inclusive Education Coordinator, and my name is Suzanne Walsh. And my role with NBACL as the Inclusive Education Coordinator is to provide support and resources to educators, administrators, students, and families. In doing so, I want to make sure that students with intellectual disabilities receive the supports they need to have an inclusive school experience. I have my education degree and was a classroom teacher for 15 years, having taught all levels from elementary to high school, and have worked with many individuals with disabilities. As an educator in my own classroom, I have had the opportunity to see firsthand how inclusion works. I have seen how powerful the benefits of inclusion can be for children, families, educators, and the community at large. Today, what our agenda is going to be, we're going to be talking about something called building social capital. So today, we're going to be talking about building social capital and why it's so important. Often our learners find themselves isolated and without many meaningful and long-lasting relationships. They often do not have a good sense of community, whether it be in the school community or basically the general community. This is a very negative thing and can lead to our learners feeling depressed, isolated, and not valued members of our society. We have to ask ourselves as parents, educators, and support staff what it is we want for our learners. Ideally, we want them to be active members in their school and general communities. We want them to have valued social roles in our society as well. This can start by helping them to build social capital at school. This webinar presentation was drawn from Al Condalucci's workshop on social capital. Al Condalucci has a PhD in philosophy and has written several books that have looked at culture, community, and social capital. He directly explores the process of relationship building and recommends 6 key steps in how social capital is built and sustained. Often, people believe that building a learner's social capital is the sole responsibility of his, her, or their parents and must happen in the general community. Some people think building social capital is more of a priority as our learners get older and are closer to graduating. The earlier you start helping learners build their social capital, the easier it will be and the more benefits they will gain. As parents, educators, and support staff, you are often the people who know the learner best in the school environment. Therefore, you are the perfect people to facilitate peer relationships. I know that many of our learners would probably rather hang out with and be around their parents, educators, and or support staff. I mean, why not, right? You know their likes, their dislikes, you know their triggers, you are accommodating, and you give them attention. Building a relationship with our learners is extremely important in having trust and building their confidence. But the reality is that if you are not around or there is a change in staffing, you may no longer be involved in their lives. Through this presentation, you will see how crucial it is for our learners to have relationships and to play meaningful roles in the school environment. Have a look at this picture. What do you see? A duck, a rabbit, maybe even both. We need to shift our perspective. We need to shift our approach. Looking at this diagram and perhaps seeing different things encourages us to shift our perspective and our approach. So discovery consists of looking at the same thing as everyone else and thinking something different. Al Condalucci encourages us to shift our perspective, our approach, and our priorities when it comes to supporting our learners. Where are we today? So 76% unemployed, 6.1% own their own home, 69% is the norm. Barriers, limitations, public transportation cuts, friendship voids and social isolation, decreased life expectancy, 10 to 12 years sooner, vulnerable people at greater risk of violence, only 32% report being very satisfied, and limitations in community engagement. In order to do those things, to shift our perspective, our approach, and our priorities, we need to first look at where we are today. And I just read those stats to you. And these stats are for adults, but it's important to look ahead and think long term, because the foundation that you build in the elementary years greatly affects our learners' success later in life. At NBACL, we have programs that support people of all ages and stages of life. Our independent facilitator works with adults to create a person-centered plan and to submit this plan for approval for funding for services. She has had a number of middle-aged individuals whose number one goal in life is to have a friend. The difference between individuals we support who have had an inclusive school experience and those that have not is very evident. We need to ask ourselves, why haven't we done better? We're going to have a look at this model or chart, which is called the micro model. So Al Condalucci says it's because we have been using this micro model where the focus is only on the person with the disability. So you can see the little stick figure in blue. Okay, so that's going to be our person with the disability. So the person is labeled, the person has the problem, the experts do an assessment, the person receives a treatment plan or an education plan. The program or plan attempts to fix the problem. Community creates benchmarks. The group of people between 85 and 115 would be considered the norm. So if you have a look at the chart, the part that's in blue, the 85 to 115, okay, that would be considered the group of people who are considered the norm. The micro model focuses on a plan to try to enhance the person's skills to try to make them a part of the norm, that 85 to 115. In a micro approach, the focus is on changing the person. Yes, it's important to help our learners enhance their skills, but is that all we can do? What happens if they're not able to enhance their skills enough to be a part of the norm, or that 85 to 115? Do they just live in a segregated world? So the effects of the micro model, okay, what we just looked at. The person is misunderstood, person is avoided, the person is not welcomed or banned, the person feels isolated and at a greater risk, and the person dies sooner. So we're going to have a look at a short video about a student named Alex that one of our past coordinators worked with and supported.
Alex is an amazingly full of energy, spirited, happy, willing to try anything kid. He's the one that would be the first to stand up if you asked him if he wanted to try a boat or kayaking or skating. He has no fear. He enjoys life to the fullest. Alex was born on March 4th, 2012 at the St. John Regional Hospital, and it wasn't until he was approximately 10 hours old that they realized that he was born with a medical condition. It was going to be an ongoing battle with health conditions. There was no clearing it up in one day and one surgery. It was going to be a lifetime of wondering if he'd ever go to school or, ever go to a daycare or ever go to a sleepover and not have to worry about these conditions that he faced. Before we had the opportunity to meet up with community living, every day was a battle, a challenge. He was severely speech delayed. He was having issues at daycares. He was on his 5th daycare. No one could handle the physical aspect. He would sit there and he would say, "I'm a bad boy." He would just be matter of fact, just, "I'm bad, I can't use the bathroom, and I'm mean and I have no friends," and just every day just to sit there and see the look on his face and know that he suffered from anxiety and that this kept him awake. It was heartbreaking to see him every night at that supper table just say he wasn't worth anything. Sarah from Community Living was the one that guided me and showed me, that this is why it's happening and this is why he's saying it and this is what we have to do to fix it.
I would say when I first met Alex, I saw a lot of positive qualities in him that I felt like maybe weren't recognized.
Just going from a couple months ago, having every dinner and every evening have someone tell you how they're worth nothing, to tell you that they're worth everything in a cup of tea, it's amazing. We were at the end of our rope, not sure where to turn, and they stepped in and took care of everything. We have a future now because of that. I mean, really. I can see, 10 years down the line, he's going to be able to do the stuff that we wanted him to do. Because it's not just someone saying, okay, here you go, and then wave goodbye, and that's it. He'll be able to move further in life.
When Sarah first met Alex, he was at a center that took a very deficit-based micro-model approach. Alex was extremely misunderstood. Instead of trying to figure out the function of his challenging behaviors, they would simply label his behaviors. Alex hit. He won't get dressed. He's rough. He can't use the bathroom. He can't calm himself down. The focus was all on him needing to change to be more typical. There was no thought into what the educators could do to set him up for success, or in how they could help his peers to be more accepting and understanding of Alex's additional needs. This led to Alex being labeled as different, incapable, bad, a baby. This was modeled by the educators in their language and approach, and his peers started to avoid him. As you can see in the video, this greatly affected Alex's self-concept. The language they used became his own self-talk. His skills and behaviors worsened, and he became very socially isolated. Thankfully, Sarah was able to help Alex's family find a center that was a much better fit for him. He did still have behaviors in the beginning, but they figured out the function of the behaviors. They adapted the environment, routine, and their approach to cater to his needs. The educators modeled that Alex is a valued part of the group. They built on his interests and showcased his strengths. He had a lovely support worker who worked really hard to facilitate friendships, and the benefits from this are clearly evident. Through building friendships, his play skills, speech, coping skills, and pro-social behaviors have all improved, and most importantly, he developed a sense of belonging. So how can we do better? Even though intentions are normally and generally good, many people are still using a micro approach. How can we do better? We're going to have a look at the macro model. So, Al Condalucci believes that there's a better way, and he calls it the macro approach. Instead of moving the person, once again, you can see the little blue stick figure, okay, on our chart. Instead of moving the person, our learner, we want to move the lines, okay, so the two black lines, creating a bigger norm where people embrace diversity, are less stereotypical, and more accepting and inclusive. This happens for our learners through building relationships and having opportunities to play meaningful roles, as well as demonstrating their capabilities. This requires focusing not just on the learner, but also on those around them. We need to look at how we can create a supportive environment where everyone is valued and feels a sense of belonging. When you know a person, you treat them better. There isn't anyone you couldn't love once you've heard their story. When you know a person, you treat them better. Really think about that for a second. I want you to imagine that you are walking down Main Street and you notice a middle-aged man on a bench crying. What would your reaction be? Chances are you would think to yourself, that's sad, but keep right on walking. Now, I want you to imagine that the man is your best friend's father. Would you react differently? Of course you would. You would probably go to him and ask him if he is okay, what's wrong, and if there was anything you could do to help. This is human nature. When we know someone, we treat them better. This is why it's important to help our learners develop relationships as early as possible. The younger children are, the more accepting they are, and the less judgmental they are. Once they get into middle and high school, children go through changes that cause them to be quite socially conscious. If you create opportunities to showcase the learner's strengths, demonstrate their capabilities in playing meaningful roles, build relationships in elementary school, they will be much more likely to be successful later on because their peers will have past shared experiences with them and therefore be more accepting, more inclusive, and more compassionate. What is social capital? The value, benefits, and resources made available and accessed through our relationships and social networks. 3 key values of social capital are instrumental, emotional, and informational. What exactly does this mean? So, the first one, instrumental, enabling people to do things. Our relationships can be instrumental in helping us accomplish things. For example, have you ever realized you need more friends when you have a move coming up or need a babysitter? Others can be instrumental in helping you accomplish things. Emotional, enabling people to feel things. What's often the first thing you want to do when you experience success? Tell someone, share your successes, get motivation. When you're experiencing hardship, oftentimes you seek advice, comfort, or want a vent. And the last one, informational, enabling people to know things. You learn things from other people you're with. Knowledge is power. For each person you know, you increase your knowledge and power. If you decide you want to put your child in a sport, what's the first thing you do? Typically, people would ask their coworkers, friends, family members if they have ever heard of any good ones. What has their experience been, etc. Research also shows social capital is related to people getting jobs, people finding others to live with, people finding rides, transportation, people being safer, increased pro-social behavior, people being more tolerant, respectful, kind, helpful, and the like. When you got your first job, who helped you get it? What is something that an employer always wants to check before you are offered a job? References. These are your social capital that like you enough that they will talk you up. When you moved out, who was your first roommate? When you didn't have a car, how did you get around? How did you get back and forth to work? Who do you call when you're afraid? Who do you call when you need help? Humans learn different behaviors in different social settings. How do you know how to act if you've never had modeling? It is the hidden curriculum of learning through experience. These interactions are the chance to develop pro-social behaviors. So simply stated, the quantity and quality of your relationships is important. The more social capital you have, the healthier you are, the happier you are, the more you achieve, the longer you live, and the better the outcomes are in your life. We're going to talk about what is called social role valorization. We play different roles in our lives, valued social roles. For example, I'm an aunt, a sister, a teacher, an inclusive education coordinator, a stylist, a pet owner, and a volunteer. Within each of these roles, I have met a variety of people that are now a part of my life because of that role. For example, as a teacher, I have, of course, met and become close friends with other teachers, but I've also met many people in the education system throughout the region. When looking at the different valued social roles you play, you can look at the possessions or the things you need or own to be able to complete that role. So, for example, as a teacher, I would need a laptop, curriculum guides, office supplies, textbook, a whiteboard, smartboard, books, access to the internet, various materials for the students, etc. And of course, through our valued social roles, we acquire skills and gain benefits. So again, I'm going to use my example as a teacher. I'm able to teach and present various types of material in different ways. I'm able to create a unit plan and a lesson plan. I know how to use a laptop, smartboard, and other technology associated with this role. There are many benefits when it comes to this valued social role: collaborating with other teachers and support staff, working with and helping children, being creative, and having fun when it comes to creating new projects and units. So as you can see, the more valued social roles you have, the more people you will meet and have in your life. You will have and become competent at using specific materials and resources, and you will acquire a variety of skills and gain many benefits. These roles are how we get the good things in life. They define who we are as people. The people we meet become people we depend on for support, advice, and for connections. We learn skills and lessons from these roles. This is why it's so important for our learners to build social capital, so that they are able to develop these very important valued social roles. Impact of environment and attitude. We're going to look at 4 different terms, okay? And you've probably heard of them before, but maybe don't exactly know what they mean. Exclusion, segregation, integration, and inclusion. So we're going to discuss how the environment and attitude affect our learners. And we are going to look at and be discussing each of the 4 terms that I just mentioned. Have a look at each of the following circles. Think of our learners as we go through each of the 4 circles together. So number 1, have a look at exclusion. That means they're excluded from that circle completely. Number 2, segregation. Find that circle, okay, the second one over, segregation. The attitude or thinking is that these children or our learners are entitled to an education. However, they are in a totally different building. They are segregated. Number 3, integration. These students or learners with intellectual disabilities can learn in the same space, but there is no integration with other children. They're still grouped together. And the last one at the top, inclusion, all interspersed. So they're all interspersed, all learners are interspersed, or our students with intellectual disabilities are interspersed. So I have a question. Do you think that there's a better way to representing inclusion? Have a look at this diagram. Shelley Moore, an inclusive education consultant supporting access to education for every learner, came up with this diagram with the class that she was teaching. They decided that the only way to ensure that there was no other was to make us all an other. Our learners require access to the right environment. The attitude that there is no other makes us all an other. All learners are unique and have their own strengths, interests, and challenges. It's about finding out what their color is and making them shine brighter. Inclusion is the concept of teaching to the diversity of all. We are all diverse. We all have strengths. We all have stretches. And we all need to get better at something. The key elements of inclusion are access. If our learners don't have access to school, then they will not be able to benefit from inclusion. Support. If there's no support, then they are not able to participate. And the last one, participation. With the proper support, they are able to participate and play meaningful roles within the school community. 6 steps to building social capital. Okay, so we've gone over a lot of information about why it's important to build social capital. Al Condalucci goes into detail on the 6 steps to building social capital. His steps are geared towards getting our learners involved in the larger community. So we're going to talk about ways that we can do this in the school environment. If you are an educator or work with the learner at school, it can be helpful to communicate with the learner's family to let them know what they seem to be interested in at school, as well as new things they have tried and did well with. You can ask parents to ask their child about what peers they have had a positive shared experience with, so that maybe they can extend this relationship to outside of the school. Step 1, find the passion or point of connection. People build relationships based on similarities and points of connection. For example, I like traveling, so when I meet someone who also enjoys traveling, we have a point of connection, something to start chatting about to get the conversation started. So the first step is to have a conversation to find out the learner's interests, passions, hobbies, skills, and talents. Similarities versus differences. When people first meet, they are drawn by their similarities, but differences can and do push us apart. What mitigates this struggle are two critical ingredients: regularity, frequency of exchange, and more similarity that people find. Have you ever noticed how someone grows on you? Have you ever had a coworker that at first you were kind of unsure of? Have you ever met someone and have had a first impression that was made by a difference, but then you became friends? Why did this happen? You had something in common and you started to see them regularly. Similarities end up overriding the differences. We cannot simply put learners together. They have to experience shared accomplishments and experiences. We're going to brainstorm. Think of the learners or your learner. What are their strengths, interests, passions, and hobbies? Are their peers aware of these? How could you showcase their strengths and interests? Can you think of any peers who they may have a point of connection with? How could you help peers to find commonality between them? A great example of this is of a boy who was in a class and who was nonverbal. His mom would send in pictures of what he had done on the weekend, and he would share these every Monday morning. His mother is helping to give him a voice. A few different things to consider when finding commonality are interests, preferences, talents, learning styles, sensory profile, family composition, past experiences, personality, and coping skills. As educators, you could do the simple icebreaker of stand, sit, or go to the wall with your learners when it comes to interests, preferences, learning styles, etc. This would help to get some information on what the learners like and may be interested in. This would also be a great way to see who to partner up when learning. This can help to create connections. Find commonality: interests, hobbies, strengths, talents, coping skills, memorable experiences, family composition, dislikes, sensory profile, personality, preferences, and learning style. A great activity for educators that is really easy to do is to have all of the learners stand in a circle. Then name some of the following: interests, hobbies. The students step in if they like that interest or hobby. Strengths, talents. Name one. Student steps in if they also have that strength or talent. Coping skills. Name a coping skill. Step in. Memorable experiences. Name some or one. Step in. Family composition. Siblings, blended family. Step in. You could also do the same using the choose a side activity. The learners go to one side of the classroom or the other, depending on their answer. Dislikes, hot or cold. Personality, morning person, night owl. Preferences, dancing, watching Netflix with a friend, nature hike, swimming, video games. You could do corners for this one. So students go to a corner of the classroom to show what their preference is. Learning styles: visual, physical, hands-on, auditory, verbal, multimodal. You may have to explain these to your learners before you try this one. As a parent, you could have a conversation with your child about these commonalities. You could create a list together or a web for each of the commonalities listed above. Embracing diversity. Color picture, sock day, empathy, understanding, and we're going to watch a little something that's really interesting called the sensory stimulator. So color picture. Give your learner a coloring page and then give them one crayon or pencil crayon, one color. Tell them to color the page. Give them a few minutes. Stop and ask how they felt. Was that fun? So wouldn't it be terrible? Wouldn't it be sad if just one single color was all the color we had? if everything was purple or red or blue or green, if yellow, pink, or orange was all that could be seen? Can you just imagine how dull the world would be if just one single color was all we got to see? So discuss with your learners how it felt to color with just one color. It probably wasn't much fun. Just like all of the different colored crayons found in a box, we are all different, all have strengths and weaknesses. How boring would it be if we were all the same? Other activities you can do with your students is sock day. So everyone wears different socks, mismatched to school. They all serve the same purpose, but they're all different. Wouldn't it be boring if we were all the same? So now we're going to look at the sensory simulator.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, and Y, and Z. Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, and Y, and Z. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V.
With the sensory simulator, you can watch the video together with your learners, even as a whole class, and then discuss afterwards how the person in each of these situations must be feeling. Probably overwhelmed, distracted, drained, and maybe even tired. Again, this is something that can be done at home and at school. Step 2, find the community, venue, or connection point. The second step is finding the community. Regardless of the situation, the fact is that people gather. They gather for all kinds of reasons and interests. For every capacity or passion, there is a place that people gather to celebrate these passions. Community. Community is a network of different people who come together on a regular basis for some common cause or celebration. Where can we find community? Bulletin boards. We can ask people, Facebook groups, school, sports, clubs, teams, volunteering, school, etc. Key ingredients of community are commonality, difference, and regularity. So number 1, commonality is what brings you there. They have a commonality with you, like music, photography, books, robotics, etc. Then they all come together, and what is the first thing all of these people that have something in common do? They start to see differences. 2, difference is a critical variable in community, no question. Everywhere we look, we see differences. It's the natural ingredient. Difference isn't bad, it's natural. But what happens is it stops you in your tracks. Commonality is the bond that brings us together, but difference is what pushes us apart. If someone acts or dresses differently or speaks another language, these are all examples of differences, which can divide. Now, how can we overcome this? Well, that brings us to our third bullet, regularity. Together with commonality and regularity, we overcome the differences. This is what makes community. Environment settings. Number 1, classroom. 2, lunchtime, recess. 3, alternative learning environment. 4, after school, extracurricular, special events. We're going to look at 4 environments or settings within the school where our learners could build relationships. I will also list a few examples for each environment or setting. So number 1, classroom, reading buddies, project interests. 2, lunchtime or recess, recycling crew, milk crew, clubs. 3, alternative learning environment, shared sensory breaks. 4, after school, extracurricular or special events. Could be Lego club, circle of friends, sports, art club. As an educator, you can help the learner to see what activities are available and perhaps help introduce them to the environment or setting in which this activity takes place. As a parent, you could discuss with your child what activities go on in each of the environments or settings at school and list which ones interest them. You could then pass this information on to the school. When looking at activities that take place in various environments and settings, we must remember to keep in mind the age of our learner. We want age-appropriate activities. We're going to brainstorm again. So think of our learners or your learner. What would be a good setting for them to develop relationships with peers at school or who they may have common interests with? Are there any clubs they may be interested in? Could a new club be started? Is there a group of peers that play or hang out at recess or break who have similar interests? How can opportunities be built into their day? It doesn't have to be a specific club or group. It could be as simple as a few students playing soccer. How could you initiate getting the learner into that game? Step 3, understanding the elements of culture. Every group or community has its own culture. The third step is understanding the elements of culture, as this will help our learners in initiating and building relationships, as well as having a sense of belonging in the group. Elements of culture. What are the rituals? What are the social patterns? What is the jargon? What is the history of the venue? Rituals. These are the expected behaviors of the culture that members are expected, whether formally or informally, to uphold. So example, routines, meeting times, dress code, if there is one, supplies needed, fees. Another example, when you are introduced to someone for the first time, you generally shake their hand. Now think for a second. In France, they kiss on each cheek. Social patterns. Where do they hang out? Where do they sit, stand? How do they engage, stay in touch, correspond, etc.? An example. So I'm going to use an example from myself. So art. When I was in high school, during lunch hour, we could go and work on our art projects. We all had our own spots, our own cubby with our work in it, knew where the supplies were kept, how to use them, how to clean up, and how to put things away properly. Jargon. Language used, terms, rules, expressions, technical terms, cheers, slang, abbreviations. I will use the example of my art class again. So some of the terms that we used, silk screening, cross-hatching, quick sketch. History of the venue. How did it become a group? Why is there a group? What is the purpose of the group? Knowing this can help with developing a sense of belonging. Brainstorm. So again, think of your learner or learners. What could you do to help them to feel prepared and confident in participating in the group? How could you create predictability, which is very important? How could you help them in developing a sense of belonging in the group? So what can we do to help prepare our learners? We could explain the activity ahead of time and even practice that activity, if applicable. We could introduce our learner to 1 or 2 members of the group ahead of time, or to students who participate in the activity. We could visit the location where the activity takes place or where the group meets ahead of time. We could practice with our learner typical conversations or interactions that might take place during the activity or within the group. Help our learner to learn the vocabulary or jargon associated with the activity or the group. Step 4, finding or enlisting the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper, someone already in the school who has some influence or authority over the other members. they can have formal or informal influence and can affect how people react to new things in either positive or negative ways. Research on gatekeepers. They tend to be positive people. They reach out to people. They are willing to take risks. They are usually flexible. Often they are right brain thinkers. These are the people that will help ensure the success of the individual or the learner in that group. These are the people that will go around and introduce everyone, that will watch out when you arrive and greet you until you're comfortable. They might make a point of sitting with you, exchanging contact details with you, give you the details of how the group works or upcoming events. You may want to take the learners to meet the gatekeeper early or before the activity starts so that they will feel comfortable participating in that activity. That way, they will already know someone there. Finding the gatekeeper is the key that unlocks the group. Another brainstorm. Is there a peer that you can think of that would be a good gatekeeper to the group, club, environment, social opportunity that you have in mind for the learner or learners? Why do you think they would be a good gatekeeper? How could you go about asking them to act as the gatekeeper? A few great examples of students who make good gatekeepers are a member of student council, captain of a sports team, an artist, a student involved in art within the school. These students make great gatekeepers because they are usually well known by most of the students. Once you have found your gatekeeper, you can discuss this role with them. You can explain the process to them and answer any questions they may have. Step 5, the skills of friendship. Once the learner is accepted and becomes a member of the group, they need to know the elements of friendship so that they are able to maintain friendships. Elements of friendships: agreeable, flexible, available, listener, non-demanding, similarity, interested. Go over this list of qualities with your learners and discuss each one. You may also want to discuss why each of these elements is so important when it comes to friendships and the maintaining of friendships. You could provide your learners with a few concrete examples if needed. The elements of friendship. So agreeable. We like people as friends who are positive and agreeable, but able to give honest feedback in an encouraging manner. We look for people with an uplifting attitude. Flexible. Life is full of twists and turns, and we want friends who are patient and willing to stick around for the ride. Available. Certainly we want people for friends who are available to be connected to us. We don't need undivided attention, but we expect some access to those we call friends. Listener. Communication is key to friendship. We want friends who can listen. Non-demanding. Friends should be helpful and supportive, but when too many demands or pressures are put on a friend, it can cause tension. Similarity. Although we might be open to diversity, with friends, we want some basic similarity. We are attracted to people who want the same things as us. Interested. Most of us shy away from people who do not seem interested in us and only talk about themselves and their lives. It needs to be a reciprocal relationship. Deepening relationships. So building initial friendships is a start in the social capital framework, but the real value and benefits happen when relationships deepen. This happens when relationships move from bridging to bonding. When we meet people and begin to engage with them, we benefit. But the more important elements of friendship unfold when we become more bonded with the person. This is when we can really count on the friend to be there for us in good times and in bad. Certainly, there is more that can be said or thought about concerning this level of deeper relationships, but suffice it is to say that here is where the real value of social capital lies, and that when we reach this level, our lives move from good to great. Brainstorm. So think of your learner or learners. Does he, she, they understand the qualities of a friend? What kind of support would they need in initiating and maintaining friendships? So depending on your learner or learners, you may want to go over the elements of friendship a few times and even provide them with a concrete example for each to help with understanding. Learners may need to be reminded from time to time about what it means to be a good friend and what is needed to maintain friendships. Are they being flexible? Do they seem interested? Are they being a good listener? Is there reciprocity within the relationship? It is not just one-sided. Here we have the key indicators of deepened friendships. Trust. These are the people you know you can count on. Love. When we think of these deeper relationships, we move closer to love. Safety. We know we are safe and secure within these relationships. Intimacy. Here we know we can divulge secrets and they will be safe. Regularity. You want to spend more time with these people. Sincerity. You know you can count on these people. And sharing. Here you know you can share safely. Share these elements of relationship with your learner and discuss why they are so important. Once again, we're going to brainstorm. Think of your learner or learners. How could you support them in deepening their relationships? Good communication between the school and with the learner's family can make a huge difference in supporting the learner when it comes to deepening their relationships. You can help them make plans, exchange phone numbers, group them with like-minded peers in class, etc. Create or suggest the creation of a circle of friends group at school. General tips. Facilitate friendships with peers rather than being the friend. Provide a just right level of support. Teach others to assume competence. Work collaboratively in developing a positive classroom environment where diversity in all aspects is embraced. And start a circle of friends group. Be sure to facilitate friendships with peers. Oftentimes our learners would like to hang out or be around their parents, or guardians, their teachers, or EA or support staff. However, once they have the skills of understanding what makes a good friend and maintaining friendships, we want to foster this. Provide the learner with a just right level of support. Ultimately, we want to foster independence and confidence in our learners, and this can only be done if they are provided with the right level of support. If necessary, teach others who work with, support, or are involved in the life of the learner to assume competence. We would rather our learners accomplish things on their own with the appropriate level of support, if needed, than become dependent on others doing things that they are capable of doing on their own. This will, again, help build independence and confidence. Work collaboratively as a team, school, family, and any others supporting the learner in developing a positive classroom environment where diversity in all aspects is embraced. Working as a team to create a plan for the learner with everyone's input, this will help the learners to succeed. We want to set them up for success. You can always start a circle of friends group within the school. As the Inclusive Education Coordinator for NBACL, I am more than happy to come to your school and facilitate a session on exactly what a circle of friends group is all about. I am also able to assist in providing resources and support surrounding the concept of what was talked about during this webinar, such as finding out who may be a good gatekeeper in your school, or to help come up with some activities to prepare the learner or learners for a new activity or group. I hope you found this presentation useful and enjoyable. I also hope that you now have a better understanding as to why a person's social capital is so important to leading a fulfilling and happy life. If you are interested in having a better understanding of social capital and community engagement, or would like to read articles, get information, or check out some of the blogs on the topics discussed during this webinar, they are available at www.alcondalucci.com.